Welcome to Leadership and Decision Making. I'm Dennis Hall, and I'll be with you as we investigate the art and science of making decisions. At the end of this lesson, you should be able to evaluate the IT project environment and its impact on the type of decisions you will face. Describe and to a degree select from among several theories of decision making. Express your decisions in such a form that they are likely to be carried out and be successful. Evaluate your decisions and those of others to identify if they are biased or based on an objective analysis. And finally, assess the consequences of your decisions. Additionally, we'll spend a bit of time on discussing decision theory, a body of work you may find helpful in understanding how decisions are made. Let's talk briefly about the IT manager's decision environment. This environment has a major impact on the way decisions are made, the decision itself, and on the likelihood that a decision will lead to a successful result. Many of the decisions you will face are time sensitive. People are waiting for the decision, and costs climb while they wait. The project's critical path may well be affected by any delay. The problem you face is complex, not just from a technical standpoint, but from the standpoint of the number of stakeholders affected by the decision, and the fact that not all are affected in the same manner or to the same degree. In some situations, the root causes of the problem you face are not clear, only the symptoms. The good news may be that you have a great deal of information available to help you make your decision. The bad news is that you may have a great deal of information available that won't be helpful. And of course, the results of your decision may be uncertain. Beware of unintended consequences. And then there are those really wicked problems. How does the sponsor see the problem? How does the user see the problem? How about the CIO, OMB, GIO? How many stakeholders are involved? How is each being affected? How will each be affected by the various solutions available to you? And is there a single technical solution to this problem? Are there multiple subsystems that will be affected? Will a software solution create a hardware problem? Finally, your decision space may be limited. The solution you select must often fit within cost, schedule, and scope boundaries. Remember, too, that not all dimensions are equal. Choices may be restricted by constraints placed on the project. Is cost more important than schedule, for example? Do you have any latitude in adjusting the scope of your deliverables? How do decision makers make decisions under these extreme circumstances? Is their performance related to the approach or style that they use? Rational, intuitive, some combination? And of course, does style really matter? Broadly speaking, there are two approaches to making decisions, rational and intuitive. Ask yourself whether you personally use the one or the other predominantly, or do you use a mixed approach? Historically, studies have shown that novices as well as professionals make more accurate judgments when they follow systematic rules rather than rely on intuitive judgment alone. However, there is a very popular book, Blink, by Malcolm Gladwell, subtitled The Power of Thinking Without Thinking, about choices that seem to be made in an instant, in the blink of an eye, but actually aren't as simple as they seem. Intuition should have a foundation in judgment and experience. Using a rational style of decision making implies a series of logical steps to solving a problem. Define the problem and the situation you face. Analyze the problem given that situation. Generate potential solutions, select the best solution, implement it, and evaluate it. There are, however, those who suggest that it's not as easy as a rational approach might imply. In a 2001 article in the Sloan Management Review, Henry Mintzberg and Francis Westley suggested 3 basic models of decision making. The first was a traditional rational approach, where you define the problem, diagnose it, design and test possible solutions, and then select the best. A second approach, however, that they suggested was actually much more common and uses insight, or seeing the solution, typically out of the blue. This second approach is an intuitive one. The problem exists, you prepare to solve the problem by gathering data, wait for that eureka moment, and then verify the solution. Don't dismiss this approach. For many people, it can work. The third approach depends on acting out various solutions, selecting the best, and then retaining that solution. Again, for many people, under many conditions, this works just fine. Mintzberg and Westley suggest that these 3 approaches ought to exist side by side as part of the decision maker's toolkit. I would suggest that the approach you take to making decisions, broadly defined as intuitive versus rational, will be dependent on the amount of time available to you, the complexity of the problem, your own experience and knowledge, and of course a number of other factors and constraints. Returning to those rather wicked problems, whatever the approach you choose, recognize that we may need to accept the best solution at the time and under the existing conditions and proceed. In that case, the leader's challenge is to create a shared understanding of the problem and a shared commitment to the possible solution. Now let me turn to a subject that was a hot topic a number of years ago, perhaps not so much today, but still provides the IT manager a valuable set of tools, that of decision theory. Let's talk about 3 general environments for making decisions: conditions of certainty, conditions of risk, and conditions of uncertainty. Under conditions of certainty, all relevant information is known and there is one dominant or best outcome or set of outcomes. You have a finite number of decision strategies you've identified, and all states of nature are known. That is, you can predict the possible conditions that may exist after your decision has been made. There are a number of tools that can assist the decision maker under these conditions, not the least of which is linear programming. To use this method, recognize that there are a finite number of known solutions. A value can be assigned to the outcome of each of these possible solutions. Your solutions are in turn subject to a set of constraints, and you're searching for the optimum. Let's take a very simple example. You have 6 programmers, 6 tasks. Each programmer can be assigned to only one task, and each task requires one and only one programmer. How should you assign your programmers to your tasks? Well, the answer is, given that information, it doesn't matter. Each programmer gets a single task. Let's assume, though, you are trying to minimize the cost of completing the 6 tasks. If the cost of each task was independent of the specific programmer assigned, then your decision would be simple. It wouldn't matter. The cost of the 6 tasks is $6,000, irrespective of who gets assigned to which task. But the more common problem, of course, is that the cost of each programmer is different. And in fact, the cost for a task depends on the programmer assigned. Given this, what is the minimum cost of completing all 6 tasks? Well, there are 6 factorial, or 720 different combinations, and you can cost out each possible combination and then select the lowest option, remembering that certain combinations, for example, any combination that has programmer 6 working on task A, is not allowed. So, while finding the optimum solution is simple, it can be quite lengthy. Excel has developed a fairly simple programming tool that can help, Excel Solver. Here's a problem I've assigned to students in a quantitative methods class. Given a project network with 7 tasks with the cost, durations, and logical relationships shown here, we can see that the critical path is ACF, the total duration is 21 days, and the total cost is $400. Let's suppose, though, that we want to investigate the cost of reducing the duration of the project, i.e. crashing the network. Then we have to add constraints as to how much reduction we can take in each task and what the cost of reducing the duration of each task will be. That is the point at which we can use linear programming to determine how short we can make the network or the duration of the project and the cost of reducing that network duration given these constraints. The basic approach is to set up an Excel table that represents all of these constraints and then run Excel Solver to calculate the cost of each day's reduction in duration to the project, maintaining the critical path information. I'm not going to demonstrate that here, but I will post a separate file actually demonstrating the use of Solver to resolve this problem and resulting in the cost is indicated here. We can reduce the duration of the project from 21 all the way down to 16 days, increasing the cost as indicated here. Again, I will show you the solution in a separate table that I'll post. Let's now move on to making decisions under conditions of risk. And to do this, I'm going to define several terms. First, states of nature, or N1, N2, and N3, indicated here, represents future conditions such as market demand or a possible competitor's decision to deploy a product that are independent of the strategy I select, but affect the results of my decisions. In this case, as mentioned, there are 3 possible sets of future conditions, N1, 2, and 3. Strategies represent the possible decisions I may make. In this case, I can choose one of 3 strategies, S1, S2, or S3. The intersection of the strategy and the state of nature is expressed by some quantitative value, in this particular case, dollars. In this first case, I'll assume that all states of nature are equally likely and calculate the expected value of each decision strategy. I then select the strategy with the highest possible value, and that's my decision. In this particular case, the best approach is strategy 3, where I can expect, on average, to receive a return of $46.67. To illustrate, here's an example from real life. I was driving in Ontario in December during a whiteout. I knew there was a car in front of me and a car in back. My decision was to either slow down or maintain my speed. I rejected the third possibility, to speed up, out of hand. My concern, of course, was what cars 1 and 2 might do. This resulted in 4 possible states of nature, assuming, of course, that neither decided to speed up. my decision table looked something like this. My choice, stay at the same speed or slow down. State of nature 1, or N1, both cars slow down. N2, car 1 stays at the same speed and car 2 slows down. State of nature 3, car 1 slows down, car 2 stays at the same speed. And in state of nature 4, or N4, both cars stay at the same speed. You can realize the outcomes depending on my decision and the state of nature as indicated in the chart. Each of my strategies has 2 bad outcomes and 2 neutral outcomes. For example, if I choose to stay at the same speed and car 1 slows down, I'm going to run into it. That's a bad outcome. On the other hand, if I stay at the same speed and both cars 1 and 2, car 1 stays at the same speed and car 2 slows down, I don't run into anybody, so that's kind of a neutral outcome. Again, it would look like from this table, since there are 2 bad and 2 neutral outcomes, that it doesn't really matter. But if you assume that car 1 is a motorcycle and car 2 is a tractor trailer, and you yourself are in an SUV, then clearly S1 is the better strategy. Let's go ahead and continue under conditions of risk, but here we'll assume that the states of nature are not equal. However, I can predict the probability of each possible state of nature. Note that the higher the risk, usually the higher the reward. I use the same method as before. However, I now add the probability into my equation for expected value and find the highest weighted average. In this case, for EV1, it's 0.25 times 50 plus 0.25 times 40 plus 0.50 times minus 50, or a negative 2.5 is my expected value of this particular strategy. I do that for each of them and select the best, which is strategy 3, since both of the other 2 strategies result in negative expected values. Notice, though, that the correct strategy depends not only on the individual outcomes within my table, but also the percentages that I've assigned. If I change the percentages, I may well change the preferred strategy. Here I have N1 at 10%, N2 at 30%, N3 at 60%, with the expected values shown here. And in this particular case, strategy 1 is the better choice. An example might be that the government has posted an RFP for a program. And I have a choice of joining contractors team A or contractor team B. So these are my choices. And the 2 states of nature that I'm concerned about is A wins or B wins. Now, contractor B has a higher probability of winning than A. But A will give me a bigger piece of the pie than B, and therefore A requires more investment on my part than does team B. The purely rational decision maker, given no other constraints, would choose to join team B. Another tool you might use in optimizing your decision under conditions of risk is the decision tree. Let's take an example. I'm in the business let me try again. I'm in the business of installing undersea cable. And my choices are to install 3 cables or to install 1 cable across a particular strait. Now, the states of nature that I'm concerned with have to do with what type of demand I will face once those cables are installed. Will it be high or low demand for service? So, this is my decision tree. My first choice is S1 or S2, 3 cables or 1 cable. If I install 3 cables, it will cost me $121 million. If I install 1 cable, I'll invest $50 million. Given either choice, and the fact that the states of nature are independent of my choice, either high demand or low demand will exist. Now, if it's high demand and I've installed 3 cables, my revenue will increase by $200 million. If I've installed 1 cable, it will increase by $90 million. Let me back up and try that again. Okay. If I install 3 cables and there's high demand, I'll make $200 million. If I install 3 cables and there's low demand, I'll make $90 million. If I install 1 cable and there's high demand, I'll make $120 million. And if I install 1 cable and there's low demand, I'll make $60 million. Now, the next thing I have to do is account for my investments. So again, in this particular case, S1, N1, I have to subtract my $120 million investment. In the case of, and that leaves me a net of $80 million. In the case of S1, N2, I have a net of minus $30 million and so forth. Now all I have to do is calculate the expected value in the same manner I did before. After I determine that there is a 65% chance that there will be high demand and a 35% that there'll be chance there'll be low demand, now I can calculate the expected value in both cases, and clearly installing 1 cable is a better proposition than installing 3 cables given the information that has been provided here. Now let's talk about conditions of uncertainty. And this is a situation where you cannot get you have no realistic appraisal of the probability of outcomes. Under these conditions, 3 different decision strategies have been identified. The first, by Hurwitz, is called the maxi-max. In this case, you select the strategy that has the highest possible outcome. In this particular case, if I select strategy 3, it's possible that I'll make $100. Wald looked at the same situation and said, well, there is a maxi-min situation or approach. In this case, you select the strategy that results in the least bad of all possible outcomes. The decision to go into Iraq might have been an example of the maxi-min approach. Savage, on the other hand, defined a strategy mini-max that minimizes the manager's regret. That is, that selects the strategy that reduces the criticism if only you'd selected another strategy. Here the calculation is a bit more complicated. We're going to develop what's known as a regret table. We'll start with the original decision table that we've had from the previous problems. But now we're going to determine regret by subtracting each outcome from the largest or best outcome in a particular column or state of nature, and then select the strategy with the least of the maximum regrets. And this is what we end up with. But let me walk you through, in fact, in a couple of times, how we come up with these cell values. Again, determine regret by subtracting each outcome from the largest outcome in a column. In column 1, the largest outcome is $100. And so we're going to subtract that first value in the first cell from $100 and get $50. We're going to subtract that next $50 from $100 and get $50. And then we're going to subtract 100 from 100 and get $0. And we're going to do this for each column and end up for each row, for each strategy, so determining the maximum regret, which in this case is $50. And then we select the lowest of the maximum regrets, and in this case that suggests that S3 is the better strategy. So let's walk through that row by row. First, if I choose S1 and N1 occurs, I lost $50 by not choosing S3. If N2 occurs, I lost $40 by not choosing S3. If N3 occurs, I'm a hero because we could have lost a lot more. And that is my maximum regret for S3. I'm sorry, for S1. If I choose strategy S2 and N1 occurs, I lost $50 by not choosing S3. If N2 occurs, I lost $30 by not choosing S3. And if N3 occurs, I lost $10 by not choosing S1. And there is my maximum regret. If I choose strategy 3 and N1 occurs, I'm a hero. If N2 occurs, I'm a hero. And if N3 occurs, I lost $40 by not choosing S1. And there is my maximum regret. And then I choose the value, the strategy, with the lowest of the maximum regrets. Here's an example. I had a project in Moscow, and we had to order radio equipment 100 days before we needed it on site in order to transport it, clear customs, do the installation, and so forth. We did need the Ministry of Telecommunications approval before we could import. However, the Ministry of Telecommunications was in the process of reorganizing, and we didn't know when they would reopen to process requests. So I had a couple of choices. One, I could order the equipment now and take a chance. Two, I could wait for approval before I ordered the equipment. And the two states of nature that I was concerned about was situation 1 or state of nature 1, the Ministry of Telecommunication eventually approves it, or they eventually disprove it. Now, this became my table. If I ordered the equipment now and they approved it, it doesn't cost me anything. But if I order it now and they disapprove it, I've wasted all that money and I've got to go ahead and order new equipment that they will approve. It's not only cost me money, but I've got a significant delay. On the other hand, if I wait for approval and they approve it, I have still lost all the delay associated with waiting for approval, and that's going to cost me money. On the other hand, if I wait for approval and they eventually disapprove it, at least I haven't wasted money by buying equipment that I can't import into the country. I still have a delay, and that can be expensive. But this is my initial table. So under Maxi-Max, I would take the best solution, which is to go ahead and order the equipment now. Under Maxi-Min, I would take the least of the bad solutions, which is strategy 2, because the worst that can happen is I could lose 100 under strategy 1. Now, for Minimax, I'm going to suggest that it's S2, and we're going to figure that out. There's our table. Now we're going to determine regret for each cell by subtracting the outcome from the largest outcome in a column, and then selecting the strategy with the least of the maximum regrets. And that's my calculation. Where do you fit? Well, Maxi-Max tends to be someone willing to take chances. A bureaucrat tends to be someone who always looks out for the worst possible things that can occur and chooses their strategy accordingly. Minimax is often the politician who wants to minimize future criticism for not having done something different than he or she did. And where does the PM fall? Well, probably across the entire spectrum. I would caution you before we leave this subject on making the best decision that not all dollars are equal. There's utility theory that deals with this, but just as an example, I might have an incentive fee contract that pays me extra money for finishing ahead of schedule and penalizes me for being behind schedule. Well, 1 day ahead of schedule or 2 days ahead of schedule is a lot different than 1 or 2 days behind schedule. So you need to be concerned not all dollars are equal. Now let's talk about the goal, and that of course is to reach a decision that's effective. And that may or may not be the best decision in terms of the rational outcomes, because an effective decision is one that is sound, is well informed, is objective, and can be completed in a timely manner. That makes efficient use of resources, that minimizes the chances of process failure, because in the case of information technology, we're often involved in processes, and an optimum solution in one particular case may have consequences in the process itself in future cases. So you want to minimize chances of a process failure and obviously maximize chances of continued process success, and leads ultimately to the desired outcome. So when we're looking at a successful decision maker, we must correctly frame the problem statement, structure the question or problem, and determine the preliminary criteria to prefer one alternative over another. For example, do we want the most effective, lowest cost option, or one that spends obligates all of our money before the end of the fiscal year? You're going to have to manage your intelligence gathering. Avoid overconfidence in what is known and ensure a broad look, not just looking for data to confirm your own biases. Use a systematic approach, not just one that works by the seat of your pants. This forces examination of many aspects and leads to a better decision than unorganized random thoughts, particularly in the situation where you have sufficient time to use a systematic approach. Learn from your feedback. Establish a system to record what you expected would happen and what did happen. Did you have enough data to make the decision, and what else have you learned? And finally, consider the meta-decision questions, such as those indicated here. Once you've made your decision, you have to turn it into a form that it can be carried out. So clearly state who does what, when do they do it, why do they do it. Provide this information as concisely as possible, and widely communicated to all people involved in carrying out the decision. Recognize, though, that you are going to have some conflict because decisions imply change. Everybody's best solution may not be the program's best solution. So you've got to manage that conflict. You can have functional conflict, which can be valuable, dysfunctional conflict, which is not valuable. The leadership challenge is to create conditions for encouraging open discussion without discouraging cooperation. If you have any questions, please post them on Blackboard and I'll try to answer them. And in the meantime, I've provided you links to two different classic examples of decision making. One having to do with the decision to launch Operation Overlord in June of 1944. The other, a series of decisions that occurred 2 years earlier during the Battle of Midway. If you have a chance to watch these videos, think through the different approaches that we've talked about and identify, at least to yourself, whether any of the material we've covered was appropriate and in fact might have been used in the two decisions that were illustrated by these famous battles. Thank you very much.